Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Why and the Buy podcast. My name is Christy Walters.
And I am Jeff Bajorek.
So last week, Jeff, we talked a lot about personal biases, especially as it relates to data, and used the book Moneyball as an example.
Great book. Great
Isn't
movie.
it?
Great book.
I talk about that book almost incessantly. I'm becoming a bit obsessed with it.
I think it's such a great example because for most of us, baseball is it's something we grow up with, especially in this country. And so it's a worthwhile metaphor because in some way, shape, or form, we can all relate to it. But then when you really dig in, and I heard about the book, I heard about all the uproar surrounding the approach that the Oakland Athletics were taking at the time. I remember being very dialed into baseball at that time, so I was very aware of what was going on and how they're going to have to dismantle the team and the free agents that left, et cetera, et cetera. But what most people don't realize until they dig in is it's one of the best business books you'll ever read.
Yes.
And even if you want the abbreviated 2-hour scrubbed down Brad Pitt version, you still get a little bit of a feel for that. And I think the acting in that movie also portrays what is unwritten in the book, which is how much of a struggle it was for someone in that position to go ahead of or go against the grain of how things were traditionally done, which I think really leads us right into what we want to talk about today, Christy, is how do you go against that grain when you have these traditions that
he really killed the sacred cow, right?
Absolutely.
In baseball, he absolutely at every turn challenged long-held beliefs. And for those of you who may not be aware of what a sacred cow is or what we mean when we talk about a sacred cow, I have a definition for you. I'm going to look at my phone, make sure I get it right. So a figurative sacred cow is a figure of speech, and it is something that is considered immune from question or criticism, especially unreasonably so. So these are our long-held beliefs, things that are just ingrained in us almost since birth or since starting at a particular company, for example, if that's the sacred cow that you're referring to. It shows itself in many different types of stories. And I think there are a lot of different givens, both in our society, in our businesses, even in our personal lives, honestly, in the things that we believe about ourselves and our own belief system. We're not suggesting you have to kill every sacred cow out there, but we definitely think that you need to be aware of them. Make sure that you can acknowledge them, you can explain them, and you have a reason for continuing to believe or to act in that way.
I think you've got to take a step back and look at what it is that you're trying to do, and if the way you're trying to do it still makes sense, which is really ties into why we do this podcast altogether, right? We take a step back, and it's the why and the buy for a reason. So why are you doing what you're doing? Why is your customer or your prospect doing what they're doing? And why is what you're doing going to lead to them making a decision in your favor, right?
Right.
Just taking that step back and reevaluating things that has been a long time since they've been even questioned. I mean, this is such a powerful topic. I can't wait to dig in.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I came up with this topic. I've recently been listening to the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss on audiobook, and I'll lay it out there. I really like Tim. I like the fact that he challenges virtually everything.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily agree with all of his techniques or tactics. However, I think he makes some really interesting points. And one of the points that he made in this book was truly a sacred cow associated with busyness. And he mentioned it fairly briefly in the book, and I'll come back to that in a second, as I definitely want to dive into that, especially when we start talking about personal sacred cows. But I started thinking about a Zig Ziglar story. And you know that I'm a big fan of Zig Ziglar. Zig's no longer with us, but his foundation or his company still does a weekly podcast. And if you aren't familiar with the Zig Ziglar podcast, I highly recommend it. They have a lot of great discussions on interesting topics. They are not afraid to tackle just about any subject. But Zig always told this story about the prized ham. And Zig was such a great storyteller, I'm not going to even do it justice. But essentially the story starts as this. It's a newly married couple, and the husband is out at the state fair and wins the prized ham. Okay. And he brings it home to his wife, and he's so proud, and he hands it over to her, and she's all excited. She gives him a kiss on the cheek, and then she takes and she chops off one end of it. to put it in the pan. And he's like, well, why did you do that? That's like a third of the ham. And she said, well, that's how my mom's always done it. And he goes, well, I don't want to give up a third of our ham unless we know is there something wrong with that part of the ham?
Right.
Why did we cut off a third of the ham? And so they called her mother. And her mother said, well, I don't know. That's what my mom always did. So they called grandma. And grandma was like, well, the ovens were so small back then, and the pans were probably a third smaller than they are right now. I had to cut off the end of the ham to let it fit. So for 2 generations, they blindly followed this given. And this is a very, very soft example of a sacred cow, but they blindly followed this tradition because it was just what had always been done. They'd never stopped to question, well, why are we getting rid of a third of the ham if there's nothing wrong with it? Why are we going through this process? And it's because that was the way it was just supposed to be. That was the way I was taught. And I thought, oh my gosh, there are so many examples of exactly that in our lives.
That's only a soft example because ham, when cooked properly, should be tender. Okay. It's the only reason that is a soft example. When you think about, for 2 generations, we just did it this way because we thought that was the way we've done it. Look at the way we run our businesses these days. Look at the way, and every salesperson out there will complain that they feel commoditized and that their customers and their prospects don't really value what it is that they're bringing to the table. Yet the first thing that most salespeople will do is cut money right off the top. Oh, what does it need to be? Yep, sure, we'll take that price. I'll 33% of the ham. 33% of your profit goes out the window because you wanted to make it easy. And you wanted to, make it palatable and get that order in, get that order submitted, get that business done, get that deal signed. Why do we do it that way? Oh, well, just make it cheaper and a bunch of people will buy.
Right.
Oh, well, wait a second. There's only so much that you can make up on volume. And
That's
then
exactly right.
When you try to cut back your profit to make it up in volume, then what we do is we set our customers up and we set society up that cheaper is better. And I saw something earlier today on LinkedIn. It was a recap of a trade show. And there were some comments there is that we're finally getting to the point where the customer experience is more valuable than price. And I commented back. I said, the customer experience has always been more valuable than price.
More valuable. That's exactly right.
It always has.
Did you get a response back from that?
No, not yet. But
okay. All right.
It's always been about price. But the fact of the matter is you've been willing to cut your price so quickly that you haven't had to put more emphasis on the customer experience.
Right.
And I think illustrated right there is this commonly held belief that it's all about price, so much so that even salespeople believe that. And that's what we need to change, Christy.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, you can see examples of both of sacred cows that exist and sacred cows that are being questioned in our everyday life. I mean, if you look at society, you can see political correctness or incorrectness. We've almost swung completely in the opposite direction when it comes to political incorrectness, right? It's almost cooler to be incorrect than it is to be correct.
Right.
And the reality is that neither one is truly the way we should be operating. We should be interacting authentically and not focusing in on being correct or incorrect, just being who you are.
Took the word right out of my mouth. Absolutely.
So, I think disrespect for authority is one. We don't have to always focus on the negative ones, but there was a time in our parents' generation, there were certain leaders that couldn't be questioned. Right. And if you question them, it was like, that collective guffaw. Oh my goodness, what did she just say? Right. And I think that's actually been a good thing for our society up to a certain point. But now it becomes disrespect for the sake of disrespect. That's a challenge that I hope actually goes away very quickly. I'd love to see some other things. In business, even things like business dress. I mean, yes. Jeff, I think you and I grew up in the same types of industries, much more conservative. Suits and ties for the women. It was suits and dresses and very professionally dressed. And I still like that sometimes. I have to kind of figure out how to dress a little bit further down so that I don't feel overdressed with clients sometimes. But it used to be that if you didn't dress that way, you were looked at negatively.
Right.
In a lot of companies, it's exactly the opposite. if you're not dressing a certain, business casual or casual way, you're coming in too dressed up, then you're trying too hard. So it's kind of interesting to see how businesses are looking at things like that. They're looking at, what does a good employee look like? How often are they at the office? What does their balance look like in life? So there's a lot of interesting long-held beliefs about business and the people within our businesses that are being challenged every day. And that's where Tim Ferriss really comes in on the 4-Hour Workweek.
Totally agree. You're right. He challenges some sacred cows that are even still too sacred for me.
Yeah, I agree.
But the fact is, what he has taught me, and I listen to the podcast regularly, and he's brought some guests on, and he's a pretty good interviewer.
Yeah.
But it's not so much his ability to interview guests as much as it's the way he interviews them. It's the topics that he discusses, and he's got a great ability to let people really talk about why they do things. And there's something about the kind of person, the kind of guest that someone like Tim Ferriss is going to have.
Yeah, right.
He's cultivated that as an authentic, to use your word, brand. And so he's going to get those kinds of people on it. And it's not so much what they say, but you can really glean from the interviews the way that these people are going about their businesses and about their careers or about their passions and their pursuits. Right. And you can't help but have some of that rub off on you.
Right.
And approach things a little differently. And it's funny, the dress code, you bring it up. You wear jeans with a sport coat now if you're a guy.
That's exactly right.
If you're a lady too, the tie is not always necessary. I was at a conference, an event yesterday. Speaker got up with a suit on, it was a gray suit, light brown loafers, no socks, and a white t-shirt untucked. Now he owns a company that makes those white t-shirts. So, okay.
Okay. Right? All right.
But he pulled it off in a way that he clearly made the effort, right?
Right.
You watch Mad Men and everybody's in a 3-piece suit and you got a tie and it's always buttoned up and everything is fine. And then, you get out of that way when you think about, why am I wearing a tie? Why am I wearing a suit? I work with my hands, right? I get involved. I roll up my sleeves. I'm constantly taking this jacket off. Why do I need to wear it? I mean, when the dress code can be distilled down to, please make an effort,
yeah,
so that you can take me seriously. I think that's where we've come, and you see a lot of different expression that way. I like wearing a sport coat. I don't really care to wear a tie. I have some really nice ties, and sometimes I like to. But I think you put on just a flashy pair of socks and maybe a pocket square or something, and it shows a little expression. It shows that there's still a level of attention to detail, which is what you're trying to get across.
Right.
But in a completely different way. And my grandparents would be horrified by something like that.
right. Exactly.
But my kids would get involved and like, oh, hey, Daddy, why don't you have my son last year for my birthday, or I think it was for Christmas, he got me a pair of socks that came with a smaller pair of socks so we can both wear the same socks at the same time.
Awesome. I love it.
It's just funny, like the way that generationally different things are embraced. And I think that's healthy. And I think that needs to be encouraged, which is, I think, what we're talking about.
You bet. Absolutely. Even going down to the roles of the man and the wife in the home, right?
It causes some friction. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and especially when there's so many dual incomes in our world, and there are a lot of, you still have to do all the things that you need to do for kids and keeping that balanced. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, I think, to find balance in our lives in general these days. And I think, when you look at your personal life, one of the other inspirations I had for this podcast was Malcolm Gladwell did a TED Talk. I think it was a TED Talk not too long ago about the importance of spaghetti sauce.
Visible solids.
Yes. And the Howard Moskowitz, the food researcher who basically through market research figured out that people wanted variety in their sauce. It wasn't about a different package. It wasn't about a different mix in a standard sauce to compete ragu and Prego, but it was basically just start adding variety. And it was the first step into variety in food retail was in the spaghetti sauce industry. And then now you've got, 500 different types of mustard and barbecue sauce and you name it.
Right.
But it was very interesting because he challenged this long-held belief about what the customer wanted, right? And so in the business world, That's huge, because how often does a company invest in in-depth market research? Not a bunch of people who already work for the company and have worked for the company for 15 years calling customers to say, what do you think about our service? Is there anything we can do better?
Right. Fill out this survey.
Yeah, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about real roll up your sleeves. What do we do if we throw everything out the window and start over? What would be the most ideal scenario for you, Mr. Customer?
Right.
And I guarantee you, if companies did more of that type of exercise, we'd see a lot more sacred cows in businesses go by the wayside, because customers would say, you don't know what I want. You're not listening to me when I do tell you. And there's a lot more that you can do to make my life better.
I will follow that up and tease another Gladwell piece that he wrote about ketchup and why there's 500 different kinds of mustard on the shelf, but really only like 3 kinds of ketchup. That was another great article. But along that same line, to take you a step back to when you're talking about family life and dual income and things like that. And I think what really gets at the heart of what we're talking about is those traditional roles have been challenged. The definitions have been torn down.
Right.
And why are they doing that? Because the outcome of that, the expected outcome of that, is that with 2 incomes, with a reassigning of those roles, that there's going to be a better outcome.
Right.
Does it cause some friction? Absolutely. And since those roles have been challenged, that's when we started seeing an increase in divorce rates and things, because that's tough. That friction is tough, and not every relationship is strong enough to get through that. However, when everybody is taught to just stay in their lane, their comfort zone, this is what I know how to do. If I just don't ask any questions and everybody's going to get along fine, that's great. But then what we're doing by challenging those standards is ultimately working through that friction for a better outcome.
Right.
And we fight that with our businesses. We fight that in sales. And we fight that with companies and corporate culture all the time. And what we have to do is believe that by challenging these long-held beliefs, that ultimately what's on the other side of that challenge is going to be more beneficial for everybody involved. And it's got to be worth the conflict in the meantime.
That's right. But I tell you what, as we look at the personal aspect of this, you have to know what that ultimate end game is in order to see your way through it.
I think you need to know what it could be to make it worthwhile to work through it, to ultimately see if it's what you want it to be. And that's the risky part, which is why nobody wants to do it. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And I think one of the toughest things, people give up too early.
Yes.
You know, and we see it in business. You see it with entrepreneurs all the time. Even Simon Sinek tells the story about the Wright brothers and the Harvard professor, I can't remember the guy's name now, that also had lots of money, lots of connections to build a powered plane. And when the Wright brothers announced theirs, or it finally hit the streets that they had launched a plane, then he gave up.
He quit.
He was like, I'm not first. I'm not going to be rich. I'm just done. And so how many people do that? They're like, oh, well, so-and-so just did that. So either I couldn't be there, or I can't share in that, or I'm just going to go do something else.
This is no longer worth pursuing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you a personal perspective. And one of the reasons why this really hit home with me, especially while I was listening to Tim Ferriss, he started talking a lot about the busyness of the work life. And I grew up in a very modest income family, middle class. We weren't poor. We certainly weren't rich. We had just what we needed. We could put food on the table. We could buy clothes. We could maybe take a vacation once a year, visit family. But we were very close-knit, and we didn't spend a lot of money. But I grew up with, my dad talks about being able to save up enough money when he was 12 years old from picking tobacco in the fields that he could buy his new shoes for school. Right. And blow my mind here, right? When you think about it, putting a 12-year-old in the fields today and what would come of that work ethic is so deeply instilled in myself and my sister. And we've done the same with our kids as well. I don't think we've done it to the level that our parents did it for us, but I had this sense for years, and I'm 46 years old, I'll admit that. I had this sense for so many years that if I was not busy, I was not valuable.
Yep.
Now, I don't want anyone to read anything into that. That doesn't mean that my parents didn't love me enough or that I was only valuable if I was doing things. I don't want anybody to take it down that way. But that was my sacred cow. There's this belief that busy was value, that one equaled the other. And it's not true. It wasn't. It's not been true in my life. It's not true in anyone else's lives. In fact, too busy is less valuable, because then you have no room for regenerating and recreating and thinking. And this last year with my business, it has shown me, it's actually been a very big challenge for me to learn to be okay with not being busy all the time.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. And so let's get after that from a couple of different ways. I mean, first of all, if you're busy all the time, you don't give yourself the opportunity to think. You don't give yourself the opportunity to be creative. You don't give yourself the opportunity to really approach problems and problem solving from different approaches. We have to face this. Anybody in business now needs creativity. We've gone to this place where it's really, really tough to just sell your time in chunks, right? I mean, manufacturing to an extent is coming back. Craftsmanship is coming back. Skilled trades are coming back in this country, economically speaking. But, you know, what you bring to the table versus just being an interchangeable cog in a machine, you have to bring something more than just your ability to pull a lever on an assembly line.
Absolutely.
But also, when you look at the corporate world, a lot of companies offer flexible work schedules. You know, business, like golf, is a results-oriented game, right? There's no pictures on the scorecard. You know, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to deliver those results in your sales territory or, you know, as a consultant or as a general manager of a business unit. The results at the end of the day, whether it's profit or it's units sold or it's units created, that's what they're looking for. So corporate world, you go and you watch Office Space and, you know, it's... You're there. I've never worked in an office environment like that, but everybody I've ever talked to tells me about how alarmingly accurate that movie is, right?
Right.
But how much wasted time is actually there? Well, hey, I showed up at 8:30. I punched out at 5, took my half-hour lunch. I got my 8 hours in. That's great. I'm done. What did you actually do? Oh, about 2.5 hours worth of work.
Right.
Okay. Well, can I just do those 2.5 hours worth of work, get my job done? I'll tell you what. I'll even do 3 hours worth of work if I only have to work 3 hours.
Right.
Okay. And now with all the access to technology and the connectedness that we have, why are you still telling yourself, I got to work 8 hours today or I didn't get anything done? You know, and I'm guilty of this too, coming from a world where I was in outside sales.
Right.
And there was a lot of travel time involved, which is really kind of wasted time. You can listen to all the audiobooks you want. You can take all the phone calls you want, but you're still moving around. You know, if you can get that same work done from your desk,
right.
You know, and I fought with my managers about this. How many customers did you see today? 2. All you saw were 2 customers? I said, yeah, but I had email and text message exchanges with 8 of them. And that's how they wanted to be contacted because they're trying to be or forced to be just as busy as I am.
Right.
So what's more important, the fact that I saw someone face to face or the fact that I had a meaningful exchange through a medium that they chose?
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, and I think the important piece is the results that you garner from that, right? I mean, that really is the ultimate element. And I think that, you know, as I started thinking about this more and more, I was like, gosh, there have to be a lot of people who are going through similar issues. One, they're like me. I traveled for 15 years of my career, and at least 50% of the time, I'm learning how to have a life at home, right? How to actually have a network here in my hometown,
right?
Because I'm not on the road. I have a great network everywhere else, but you know, in Atlanta, I'm really, you know, been working to rebuild that. And even things like, are you in the right role? Are you in a role as an administrator, as a technologist, as an operator, in operations, installation, integration, whatever it may be? Are you there just because it was the path of least resistance? Coming out of college, it was the path of least resistance for me.
Right.
It was right there. It was laid out on a silver platter for me, and I just went down that path.
Sure.
So at some point, are you questioning the things that even you believe about yourself? I talk to people in coaching calls all the time about their belief system. You cannot insulate yourself with, one, your self-confidence, your humility, and your commitment to what you believe you put on this earth to do. then it's going to be very easy for people to tear you down.
Yep.
And you have to constantly work on it. But before you can do anything else, you have to have that belief system established and in place. It doesn't mean you have to have everything perfect. Doesn't even mean you have to be in the role you're supposed to be in. But you need to know with unfailing confidence that this is what you were put on this earth to do.
I completely agree with you. It's really hard to do.
Absolutely.
The thing about long-held beliefs is that they're long-held for a reason. So let's just say that I don't believe in being cruel to animals and I don't like killing cows.
Right.
Never mind the steak dinner that we're going to have. But how do people do that, Christy? It's one thing to say that you're going to kill a sacred cow. Do all of these sacred cows need to be killed?
No, not at all. I mean, I think, and some of them are there for a reason. Something that you should not question is, the fact that you're here to make other people's lives better.
Right.
There are just a lot of different elements that you want to make sure you understand. All I'm suggesting is question your motives, question your why, understand your purpose for that action or for that belief. And if you can do that and you can state it without an issue, then absolutely they stay around. You don't have to kill them either, right? You can also question them and start moving in another direction if you want to do that. If you decide, hey, gosh, I've been in this role all this time, but I'd really just love to go be a speaker. I just want to be a public speaker. That's actually a lot easier to do than you think. So, but it's work. You have to get there to do it. And you have to question those long-held beliefs so that you know that is the right path. So I think it's just a matter of being aware and not being afraid to say why and what if.
The word that made me tingle a little bit, gave me goosebumps, was afraid.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's hard. It's scary, especially when something hasn't been questioned before.
Yeah.
The hard thing is to ask that question. The really hard thing is to answer it.
Yeah.
And we've all been there. But the thing is, the bravery to be able to power through those obstacles.
Right.
And to power through that difficulty, that scary situation. One, the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yep.
But two, I think when you can really find out and determine what's at the heart of everything that you're doing, the motive for why you're acting the way you're acting, the motives that are driving your customers' actions. That's a tremendous ability to have. And it's one that doesn't come without work, doesn't come without paying the price, but it's invaluable once you're able to get it. And I think that's what really separates the superstars from the average performers.
Yeah, that small difference between success and failure, right?
Absolutely. Very, very small.
Yeah. And I think the other element I would add to how do you deal with the sacred cow that you don't want to kill is find like-minded people. So if there's something that you're questioning in your life or in society, you look at the civil rights movement, you look at a lot of critical movements over the last 100 years or so, politically, especially in our country, you see that that's typically not one individual. It is a group of like-minded individuals who came together with a strong passion and commitment for that purpose. You can find that even for your own life. You can find that mentor or coach or friend that can really help you answer some of these questions or at least vet out what the answer is for you.
Stands like this are not taken alone.
No,
that's for certain, or at least not for long. It's not long before someone else is going to feel the same way as you, and they're going to join the cause. So to speak.
Yeah.
We got to be careful, Christy. We may start a revolution.
I love it. The why and the buy revolution. Yeah.
This was a fun topic to talk about. I can see us coming back to this in future episodes because there's so many different ways that we can take this.
Well, I tell you what, I would love to hear from some of our listeners. If anyone has some thoughts on this topic of sacred cows, or maybe you have one that we didn't talk about today, I would love to hear their thoughts on this as well. And you can email that to the why and the buy. That's THEWHYANDTHEBUY. I did that. I cannot believe it.
Nice work.
@gmail.com. You can also catch us at thewhyandthebuy.com, the website for more details. And Jeff, you want to talk about what our next podcast is going to be about?
Well, I think our next episode is going to be about preparation. Christy, you and I are salespeople, and being successful salespeople, we know that the hard part about selling is not actually the selling part, it's the prep work ahead of time. If you are able to do the other hard thing, questioning long-held beliefs, but sitting down and realizing that selling starts a day before, 2 days before your call, with the research you're able to do, with what you're able to determine is the way that you're going to connect with your prospect, the value you can provide to the prospect, the questions you're going to ask to tease out that conversation and what their motives and what their needs are. The selling part just happens if you're prepared. All you have to be is likable at that point. And Bob Berg said that people will buy from people they know, like, and trust. Well, once they know you and they like you, it's much easier to trust you.
Yeah.
So if you get the likable part down and you've done enough of your prep work to get them to believe that you are someone who is going to work for and with them, the trust part comes so much more easily. And most salespeople aren't willing to do that.
Absolutely.
That's what we're going to talk about next time. I really like that we were able to tackle this topic today, because when we talk about stepping back, and the Why and the Buy podcast is about understanding why you're doing what you're doing, because when you understand your whys, your hows and your whats become much better.
Love that tagline.
It's a good one.
Yes.
It's a good one. You helped with it.
Oh, thanks.
So thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you next time on the Why and the Buy podcast. I'll talk to you soon, Christy.
All right. Sounds good, Jeff. See ya.